a number of issues around this statement. But first of all, he says that what are the proofs for this statement? The proofs are the saying of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Al-Insan, Surah 76, verse 30. Allah says, وَمَا تَشَاءُونَ إِلَّا إِن يَشَاءَ اللَّهُ, that you do not will except as Allah wills. Indeed, Allah, inna Allah kana aliman hakima. Indeed, Allah is all-knowing, all-wise. And likewise, he says in Surah At-Takwir, Surah At-Takwir is Surah 81, verse 29, وَمَا تَشَاءُونَ إِلَّا إِن يَشَاءَ اللَّهُ رَبُّ الْعَالَمِينَ, that you do not will except as Allah wills, the Lord of the worlds. And we see that here the Shaykh has used verses which mention Allah's Mashi'ah. Now we have two things. We have Allah's Irada and we have Allah's Mashi'ah. And we have to understand that Allah's Irada is not entirely the same as Allah's Mashi'ah. And when we say Allah's Irada, there is a difference which will be explained shortly, inshallah ta'ala. But what we should understand, that when it comes to Allah's Irada, when we speak of Allah's wish, so in order to make it clear in English, when we say Allah's Irada, we will use the word wish, Allah's wish or Allah's desire. And when we say Allah's Mashi'ah, we will say Allah's will. Allah's will. Right? So to help us distinguish between the two things in English. So when we speak of Allah's Irada is of two types. Allah's Irada is of two types. Allah's Irada is, the first type is Allah's Irada Kawniyah. Al-Irada Al-Kawniyah. This refers to everything which occurs within the creation. Everything which occurs in the creation and takes place in the creation, it occurs by way of Allah's Irada Kawniyah. Meaning that Allah's wish that relates to the creation, that relates to everything besides Him. And so this is what we call the Irada Al-Kawniyah. And the other type of Irada is the Irada Shar'iyyah. Irada Shar'iyyah. And this is the Irada, this is something that Allah wishes and desires from the servants, that they fulfill and that they perform and that they abide by. Right, so we as Ahlul Sunnati wal Jama'ah, we distinguish between these two types of Irada, and we don't treat them to be the same. If we treat them to be the same, then this will lead us to the mistake, and it will lead us to the foundation of the bid'ah of the Qadariyah and the Mu'tazila who spoke of the bid'ah of al-Qadar. Right? We distinguish between these two types of irada. Allah has an irada which is irada kawniyah as it relates to everything in the creation, and an irada which is shar'iyyah which relates to the things which Allah requests and desires from His servants in terms of the commands and in terms of the prohibitions. So for example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He wishes for His servants to have iman, to have faith. He wishes for His servants to establish the prayer. He wishes for His servants to, and desires from His servants to follow and obey the messengers. He wishes and desires from His servants that they honor and respect the parents, and so on and so forth, from all the other things which are desired in the Sharia. At the same time, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He does not wish, He does not like from the point of view of the Sharia, He does not wish from the point of view of the Sharia, the Irada Shar'iyya, that a person become a disbeliever, or that a person choose disbelief, or that a person commit shirk, or that a person fall into disobedience, or that a person commit a major sin. However, so this is Allah's Irada Shar'iyya. However, Allah from His Irada Kawniyya, He will wish and will that a person actually fall into disbelief, or that a person accept iman, or that a person fall into a major sin, or that a person do a righteous deed. Right? So we distinguish between these two things. And so from one angle, we see that nothing occurs in Allah's creation, neither shirk, nor kufr, nor disobedience, nor iman, nor tawheed, nor obedience. All of these things are exactly the same as it relates to Allah's irada kawniyya. Allah's irada kawniyya. Everything which takes place is exactly the same as it relates to Allah's irada kawniyya. The belief of a believer, the disbelief of a disbeliever, the shirk of a mushrik, the sin of a disobedient one, the righteousness of an obedient person, all of this comes under Allah's irada kawniyya. But as it relates to Allah's irada shar'iyya, then this is separate and this is different, and Allah only wishes from His servants that which He has revealed to them through the books and the messengers of Tawheed and the Iman and the Sunnah and righteousness and so on and so forth. So we make a distinction between these two types of irada. But what is the difference between irada and mashi'a? Okay, what is the difference? And basically, when we speak of Allah's mashi'a, Allah's will, then it is the same as Allah's irada kawniyya. Okay? These two words at this point can be used interchangeably. When we say al-mashi'a, Allah wills something, then it only refers to those things which are from the affairs which are kawniyya. So this then makes it equal to Allah's irada kawniyya. So irada kawniyya and Allah's mashi'a are the same thing. So whether we say Allah wills in this case, or whether we say Allah wishes, right, then really they are the same thing, because they are relating to everything which takes place in the creation. But we cannot use the word mashi'a to refer to Allah's irada shar'iyya. We don't say the mashi'a shar'iyya. There's no such thing, because Allah's mashi'a is only used for those things which take place in the creation. Only for those things which take place in the creation. Whereas Allah's irada, Allah's wish, what Allah desires, that can refer to, things which take place, which He wills to take place, and things which He does not will to take place. Right? So Allah didn't wish, Allah He requested from Abu Jahl to become a believer. Right? So from His irada shar'iyya, He wanted Abu Jahl to become a believer. But from His irada kawniyya, which is the same as Allah's mashi'a, Allah's will, He did not will that Abu Jahl should come a believer. Okay, so we distinguish between these two, and so irada is not the same as mashi'a in every single respect. Rather, the irada kawniyya is Allah's mashi'a, and as for the irada shar'iyya, that does not, we cannot speak of that in terms of Allah's will. And so this is basically what we distinguish between these two things. And so after this, after it's become clear to us that when we speak of Allah's irada kawniyya, that it is the same as the mashi'a, then we see that there are a number of verses which speak about Allah's wish. Allah says, وَمَا اللَّهُ يُرِيدُ ظُلْمًا لِلْعِبَادِ, that Allah does not wish for oppression upon His servants. And Allah says, يُرِيدُ اللَّهُ بِكُمُ الْيُسْرِ وَلَا يُرِيدُ بِكُمُ الْعُسْرِ, that Allah, that He wishes for you ease, and He does not wish difficulty upon you. These verses are speaking about Allah's irada shar'iyya, meaning that by way of what Allah has revealed, the commands, the prohibitions, Allah does not want to burden you. Allah does not want to commit oppression upon you. Allah does not want to make things hard upon you and burden you. Rather, all of this refers to Allah wishing and wanting ease and benefit for His servants. And so, also we see that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He mentions about some of the disbelievers. He says in a verse, وَلَوْ عَلِمَ اللَّهُ فِيهِمْ خَيْرًا لَأَسْمَعَهُمْ وَلَوْ أَسْمَعَهُمْ لَتَوَلَّوْا وَهُمْ مُعْرِضُونَ. Allah says that if Allah knew of any goodness in them, He would have made them to hear. Made them to hear the guidance. But if He had made them to hear, they would have simply turned away, and they would have turned away. This shows here that this comes back to Allah's knowledge. Allah is speaking about a group of people, and Allah knows that there is no goodness in them. And so for that reason, He did not cause them to hear the guidance. So He did not will from His mashi'ah, or from His irada kawniyah, He did not will them to hear the message. He didn't will it for it to occur. Why? Because He knew that if He had willed for them to hear the message, they wouldn't have listened anyway. They would have simply turned away. So what this proves and what this shows, this verse, is that whatever Allah wills will occur. Whatever Allah does not will, meaning with the Mashiach, will not occur. And it is also in Allah's knowledge that if He had willed something to occur with His will, then He would have known what would have happened. Okay, and then even if that thing never even happened in the first place, even if He never willed it in the first place. So all of this shows that Allah's mashi'ah, Allah's will, which is the same as Allah's irada kawniyah, which is Allah's wish tied to the affairs of the creation, then this is tied to Allah's knowledge and His wisdom. It is tied to Allah's knowledge and His wisdom. What does this mean? This goes back to the point we mentioned earlier, that for example, if Allah wills for an earthquake or a tsunami or some kind of calamity or some sort of disease or whatever it might be, then Allah has willed that thing to occur with mashi'ah. And Allah has wished for that thing to occur with the irada kawniyah. And this is tied to Allah's ilm, His knowledge, and it is tied to His wisdom, hikmah. It is tied to those affairs. And we see that as for the irada shar'iyyah, meaning that which Allah wishes and desires from the servants that they perform, even though He might not will that they perform it, right? So Allah wishes from you, Allah wishes from a person, like we said about Abu Jahl, for him to become a believer. Yet Allah, or Abu Lahab for example, He wished for him to become a believer. Yet Allah willed for him to never become a believer. Right? And all of this is, so Allah's will here, which is the mashi'ah, is tied to Allah's wisdom and His knowledge and His knowledge. So from this we see that when Imam al-Tahawi says وَلَا يَكُونُ إِلَّا مَا يُرِيد, that nothing occurs except what He wishes, what is he talking about? Which irada is he speaking about? Is it irada shari'ah or irada kawniyah? Irada kawniyah. Yeah, this is speaking about irada kawniyah. It refers back to the irada kawniyah. And from this we distinguish, as we said, the important point to take from this is that we distinguish between the irada shar'iyah and the irada kawniyah. And by not distinguishing between these two things, then we fall into the innovation and the mistakes of the people, like the Qadariyah, who could not distinguish between these two things, and they had a misunderstanding about what is the notion of justice, al-adl, as it relates to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the second point that the Shaykh explains here is that we can look at this thing from 2 points of view, from the point of view of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and from the point of view of the servant. So it's similar to what we said before, that when Allah wills a thing, or when Allah wishes a thing with His irada kawniyah, we see nothing but wisdom in that action. But as for the servant, when we see a servant has his wish as well. He has his irada, he has his mashi'ah. And he does things according to his own mashi'ah. Now it could be the case that Allah's irada shar'iyyah, that Allah's irada, that when He requests something from the servant, and when He wills it from His irada kawniyah, that it happens that the servant's irada agrees with that, in the sense that a servant, he does something which agrees with Allah's wisdom. And it could be the case that it does not agree with what Allah has willed or what Allah has wished. To give an example, again, some of this is quite technical, and the best way to really explain it is to give examples. This is when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He wishes from a servant to, for example, let's say to write a will, for example. And so when He writes the will, there will be a certain wisdom behind that, which is that the wealth will be distributed according to His wishes, and there will be no disputes amongst the people who He leaves behind from His family. And so there's a wisdom behind that. And so this is something Allah has requested and wished from the servant. And then the servant, Allah may will, or He may wish from His irada kawniyya, that the servant, that he might do this or he might not do this. So He might write the will, or He might, His legacy or His will, or He might write it but do it upon injustice, meaning that He gives away more than 1/3 of His wealth, or that He leaves something from someone. So He basically does something which is incorrect. So in this case, even though Allah, in Allah's action, we say here that from the point of view of Allah's irada shar'iyya, meaning what Allah requests and wants from the servant, obviously there is wisdom, because everything in the Sharia there is wisdom. In terms of what Allah actually willed to happen from His mashi'a and His irada kawniyya, in fact what actually took place, which is whether the servant did or didn't write the will according to the right way, then whatever the case, in either of the two situations, yes he did, yes he didn't, then there is nothing but perfect wisdom in Allah's action, right? In Allah's mashi'a, in what Allah will to actually take place. And likewise in Allah's irada kawniyya. But as for the servant, if the servant agreed with, if the servant in his intention, in his irada, he was intending that I am going to write the will according to the Sharia and give everyone his due right, then here it has happened that by way of Allah's irada kawniyya, that the servant's irada and the irada of the Sharia, it has come together. And if the man didn't, write it according to the Sharia and he pressed somebody or whatever, then here there is no wisdom in that man's action. The wisdom has gone from that man's action, and so even though in Allah's action there is still wisdom. Do you understand? So we have to distinguish between all of these different situations, and not to treat them as the same thing, because as we said before, not making these distinctions, it will cause us to fall into the mistakes of the Qadariyya. And so for this reason, the conclusion that we come to from this is that when we speak about Allah's action, then everything which takes place in His creation agrees with wisdom, with hikmah. Right? So this is the lesson that we're taking from this. Everything that He does, that takes place as it relates to Allah, it is in agreement with wisdom, with hikmah. But that cannot be said about the actions of the servants. So as it relates to me and you, that when we do something, then it may or may not relate to hikmah, as it relates to us and what we intend, as it relates to the fact that these are our actions. But as it relates to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then it is nothing but perfect wisdom. Again, to give an example, it may be the case that Allah establishes an evil ruler upon the people. This ruler oppresses the people, kills them, murders them, takes their wealth, imprisons them, beats them, and so on and so forth. Right? This action by the ruler is evil. This is evil on behalf of the ruler, and nothing that the ruler does can be said to be wisdom, as it relates to his actions judged by the Sharia. As it relates to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then every single deed of that ruler, all of his murder, all of his killing, all of his oppression, all of his confiscating the wealth, imprisonment and everything, all of that, then we say that in all of that there is a far-reaching wisdom, because there is nothing in Allah's creation that is not from His wisdom. Okay? So in other words, what we're doing here is that we're trying to separate and distinguish between the actions of the servants and what can be said about them, and the irada of the servant, and likewise the actions of Allah and the irada of Allah, which is irada shar'iyya and irada kawniyya. So everything which is from Allah's irada kawniyya, meaning that Allah's wish that relates to the created affairs, which is the same as mashi'ah, then all of that is perfect wisdom as it relates to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as it relates to the actions of the servants and their will and their wish. Then we can't say the same thing, that there is wisdom in that, unless it agrees with Allah's irada shar'iyya. Unless it agrees with Allah's irada shar'iyya. So, the conclusion here then from this is that everything that is good is ascribed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, meaning that everything which takes place as it relates to Allah is goodness and wisdom. And evil is not to be ascribed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We don't say that that Allah performs evil, or Allah does evil. This cannot be ascribed to Allah's action. Rather, we say Allah creates evil, and in His action of creating evil, there is perfect wisdom and justice. That in Allah's action of creating evil, it is perfect wisdom and justice. But as for the evil, it exists only amongst His creatures and the created beings. But as for Allah, like when Allah, as we said, in all the examples that we gave, whether a thief steals, whether a murderer he murders, whether a ruler oppresses and kills and confiscates wealth, whether a tsunami takes place or an earthquake takes place, all of these are from Allah's actions. And in Allah's actions, each of those actions are perfect wisdom and justice. But as it relates to us, then the evil is found amongst us. So the killing of a murderer is evil, the stealing of a thief is evil, and so on and so forth, to all the other things that we find, diseases and other disasters, all of that we treat that to be evil as it relates to us. And so from this, Allah's irada is always in accordance with hikmah. This is what you should be writing down as the conclusion, that Allah's irada is tied to His ilm and hikmah. Allah's irada is tied to His ilm and His wisdom, to His knowledge and His wisdom. And so, whether that is, so in the Sharia, what we see in Allah's Sharia, all of the legislations and the commands, and all of that is perfect wisdom and justice. And likewise in what Allah wills to occur from His irada kawniyya, and what Allah wills to occur from His mashi'ah, all of that likewise is from perfect justice. Nothing takes place except which is just and perfect wisdom, hikmah. All of that is tied. And the Shaykh says that again we have many other issues branching off from this discussion, like for example, what is dhulm, what is oppression, what is justice, what is there's many other things to do with disbelief taking place and sin taking place, and a man and his own actions, does he create them? All of these are separate issues. But because later on in At-Tahawi's creed we see that Imam At-Tahawi discusses the issues of qadr in a bit more detail, then these issues will be dealt at the appropriate point in At-Tahawi's creed when we come to that, inshallah. But for now, the purpose here behind the statement وَلَا يَكُونُ إِلَّا مَا يُرِيدُ وَلَا يَكُونُ إِلَّا مَا يُرِيدُ, that nothing takes place except what He wishes. Then what we need to take away from here is, first of all, everything comes under Allah's wish. Nothing escapes Allah's wish. And by wish we mean Allah's irada. And Allah's irada itself is of two types, the irada shar'iyya and the irada kawniyya. And when it comes to mashi'ah, when we use the word mashi'ah, then by mashi'ah we do not treat it to be exactly the same as Allah's irada from every single respect. Rather, we say that there is Allah's irada shar'iyya, which is what Allah wants from His servants and requests from His servants, that they abide by the Sharia. This is what we call irada shar'iyya. And then there's the irada kawniyya, which relates to what actually takes place. Right? So it's not the case that it is not the case that Allah loves everything which He wills to take place. Right? So if Allah wills Abu Jahl or Abu Lahab to be disbelievers and to remain disbelievers, then it does not mean that Allah loves what He wills to take place. Rather, Allah dislikes disbelief. Allah dislikes shirk. Allah dislikes disobedience. So again, we have to be clear about these issues, that not everything that Allah wills from His irada kawniyya or from His mashiyah does He actually love. Right? So that's another issue, inshallah, that maybe we'll discuss when it comes later on. But these are some of the points that we should try to associate with this particular point of Imam al-Tahawi. وَلَا يَكُونُ إِلَّا مَا يُرِيد. I know that some of the issues here are quite technical and maybe difficult to grasp without lots of examples. But inshallah, if there's anything that's not unclear, then if you have any questions, we can address them inshallah ta'ala. Otherwise, as we said, this issue is dealt later on in At-Tahawi's Creed, where he discusses Al-Qadr in more detail. So maybe those issues will be expanded upon at the relevant point inshallah ta'ala. So if you have any questions on anything that's been said, feel free to ask before we conclude.